We've reached a new month, so now it's time to rank all four January 2025 releases that I saw from worst to best. In last place is Back in Action, a generic action movie released to Netflix. If you saw the trailer for it and thought, this looks pretty generic, I've seen this before and done much better, this isn't going to surprise you. The plot has already been done in Mr. and Mrs. Smith. The plot is a generic spy movie, the action isn't that impressive, none of the jokes are funny, and honestly, everyone involved with this movie deserves better. Jamie Foxx, Cameron Diaz, Glenn Close, Kyle Chandler, even Andrew Scott, who I haven't seen since Sherlock ended and was pleasantly surprised to see here, are all great in other things, but with this, you can tell they're just there to get their paycheck and leave. This movie started production shortly after the COVID lockdowns ended and movies started production again, and you can tell. Everyone is just there to make a few bucks. There's no effort or passion put into this. It's painfully generic. Number 3, Star Trek Section 31. Now, just so you know where I'm coming from, I don't consider myself a Trekkie. My only experience with the world of Star Trek was the Chris Pine movies and Wrath of Khan. My first time watching all the Trek movies was over the last couple of weeks so I could do a ranking, so I don't know how diehard Trekkie loyalists are going to feel about this movie. But as for me, I found it quite fun. It had a very different flavor than the other Star Trek films, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. The films based on Next Generation had a different style than the ones based on the original series. The Chris Pine movies were all very different from those, so I didn't mind it too much. Some people may not like that the soundtrack consists of pop rock music, but if you remember, the Chris Pine ones had Beastie Boys in the soundtrack, so it didn't feel that out of place to me. This is a Trek film that stands on its own, and doesn't expect you to have any prior knowledge of anything, similar to how Moon Knight was a pretty good standalone MCU project, and how the first season of Mandalorian was pretty standalone. Michelle Yeoh does a great job in the film. The tone is basically Suicide Squad meets Guardians of the Galaxy, and as someone who enjoyed both of those films, I enjoyed this one as well. Now, there are some pacing issues, particularly with how the film feels somewhat episodic, like this was originally supposed to be a series that they changed to a movie at the last second. The actor who plays the villain could also overact a bit at times and feel pretty cartoony. The humor in the movie also feels a bit forced, and for me it didn't work. And the dialogue that was supposed to be humorous fell really flat. But what the film does well is its slick action sequences and editing. If you're not a Trekkie and you're looking for just a fun sci-fi action film, this is for you, but I can see why Trekkie loyalists may not enjoy it. If you saw the trailer and thought, this isn't for me, it's not going to surprise you, but if you thought it looked fun, it's worth checking out. Number 2, Wallace and Gromit, Vengeance Most Fowl. After 20 years, we finally have a new Wallace and Gromit movie, and while it isn't as clever as Curse of the Were-Rabbit, it's still a very enjoyable outing. The film has sharp dialogue and visual gags and puns typical of Aardman. However, the plot, while still good, doesn't seem as clever as it could be. The plot revolves around AI and the dangers of over-reliance on technology, but it doesn't present anything new with this idea, and it doesn't satirize it the way the Were-Rabbit movies satirized monster movies, or Chicken Run satirized prison and spy movies. It's still a cracking good time, but it's not exactly Aardman's A-game. And in number 1 is DreamWorks Dog Man. Now, just so you have my point of reference, I went into this movie not really knowing anything about the world of Dog Man, other than the books were written by the same author as Captain Underpants. The first book came out after I had already graduated high school, and the only reason I knew these books exist at all is because I have younger siblings who at the time were the target age group for the books, but I never read them. So I don't know how faithful of an adaptation the movie is, but as someone who saw it on the basis of it as just a movie, I really enjoyed it. The animation is very unique for a DreamWorks film, looking like book illustrations come to life, mixed with the comic book aesthetic of Spider-Verse and the Batman 60s TV show. There's a lot of fourth wall-breaking self-referential humor and sharp writing, and for a movie about a character who's half dog and half man, it's a surprisingly heartfelt movie with a sweet message about found family and overcoming generational trauma. The villain is less of a traditional villain, and more of a Dr. Doofenshmirtz type, where he's not really that evil, he just enjoys causing mayhem and doesn't mind being stopped by his silent animal nemesis. His motivation is very similar to Dr. Evil from the Austin Powers movies, where he makes a mini-clone of himself to be his son. From there, it becomes a story about found family that's very heartfelt. It's a fantastic movie that both kids and adults will enjoy. There are a couple of criticisms I have with the film. Mainly, the first 20 minutes move a bit too quickly. There are a few real-world references that feel a bit out of place, since the world of the film has business names that are very generic and are meant to set the film in its own world and give it its own identity. And the other issue I have is that the main character is a dog who can't speak, but yet the villain and his son, who are both cats, can speak English, and they don't give an in-universe explanation for this. Little nitpicks, but overall this is a fantastic film for all ages. There you go, there's my review of the January 2025 releases that I saw. Leave yours in the comments.